A millionaire gave $1,350 to a waitress to save her son's life. The next morning, he found her at the grave of his beloved who died 27 years ago. The gentle patter of rain against the cobblestone streets of Portland created a soothing rhythm that Jennifer Lewis had grown to love during her 6 years in the city. The weather matched her mood today, steady, persistent, and carrying on despite everything. She adjusted her name tag and tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear before pushing through the back door of Memory Corner Cafe. "Morning, Sal," she called to the cook, who was already flipping pancakes on the grill despite the early hour. "Hey, sunshine, how's our little man doing today?" Salvador asked, his weathered face crinkling with genuine concern. Jennifer forced a smile. "The doctors say he's stable. No worse, no better." She tied her apron around her waist, the familiar motion grounding her in routine. What she didn't tell Sal was how she'd spent last night counting her savings for the 5th time this week, how the pile of medical bills on her kitchen table seemed to grow taller with each passing day, how the surgery that could save her son's life remained just out of reach. $1,350 out of reach. To be exact. "You're opening the register today?" Sal asked, sliding a cup of coffee her way. Jennifer nodded, gratefully accepting the cup. Her fingers instinctively reached for the half medallion of St. Jude that hung around her neck on a worn silver chain. The small piece of metal was warm against her skin. As though carrying the heat of her constant prayers, Nancy always said St. Jude watches over impossible cases, she murmured to herself. And if anyone qualified as an impossible case right now, it was her 7-year-old son, Tyler, fighting a congenital heart condition from his hospital bed as she prepared the cafe for opening. Jennifer's mind wandered to her childhood with Nancy Fletcher, the woman who had raised her after her aunt. Deborah died when Jennifer was 15. Nancy had been more than a guardian. She had been Jennifer's rock, her compass, her everything. 3 years since cancer took her, and Jennifer still found herself wanting to call Nancy whenever life became too much to bear. "You've got your mother's strength," Nancy used to tell her, though Jennifer had never been sure if she meant Deborah or herself. Either way, Jennifer clung to that strength now, as she did every day, across town. In a sleek high-rise apartment overlooking the city skyline, David Peterson stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the rain create rivulets down the glass. At 52, he had achieved everything society deemed successful: a thriving business empire, wealth beyond necessity, respect in his industry. Yet on days like today, the anniversary of the accident, all of it felt hollow. 27 years. Sometimes it felt like yesterday that he had kissed Deborah goodbye before her ill-fated drive along the coastal highway. His beautiful wife, 5 months pregnant with their first child, had never returned from that journey. The authorities had never recovered her body from the ravine where her car had plunged during the storm, leaving David with a memorial stone rather than a grave to visit. David's hand moved to his wallet, fingers finding the small compartment where he kept half of a St. Jude medallion, the patron saint of lost causes. How fitting. He and Deborah had split it as a token of their love just weeks before the accident. "As long as we each have half, we'll never truly be apart," she had said. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his memories. "Mr. Peterson, the board is waiting for your final decision on the Portland acquisition." His assistant's voice reminded him. "Tell them I'll have an answer by end of day. I need to review some details first." "Of course. And sir, your $2,000 PM with the foundation has been confirmed." David nodded, though his assistant couldn't see him. The charitable foundation he had established in Deborah's name was perhaps the only thing that gave him any sense of purpose these days. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll be heading out shortly." He gathered the documents for the Portland property acquisition, a small cluster of downtown buildings that included a few local businesses. Perfect for redevelopment. The rain was coming down harder now. David grabbed his umbrella and headed out. Perhaps a change of scenery would help clear his mind on this difficult day. By mid-morning, Memory Corner was buzzing with regulars. Jennifer moved efficiently between tables, refilling coffee cups and delivering orders with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Each tip that landed in her apron pocket was mentally added to her savings for Tyler's surgery. "Careful, honey. That's hot," she warned an elderly customer as she set down a plate of French toast. The bell above the door chimed, and Jennifer glanced up to see a man in an expensive suit entering. Shaking raindrops from his umbrella, there was something commanding about his presence, though his eyes carried a distant sadness that seemed at odds with his polished appearance. "Table for one, sir." Jennifer approached him with a menu. "Please." he replied, following her to a corner table by the window. "Our special today is Belgian waffles with mixed berries," she offered. "Can I start you with some coffee?" "Black coffee would be perfect, thank you." As Jennifer moved to get his coffee, she couldn't help noticing that the man seemed distracted, his attention caught between the documents he'd spread on the table and the rain-soaked streets outside. When she returned with his coffee, he ordered without looking at the menu. "Just toast and eggs. Over easy. Coming right up, Mr. Peterson," he supplied. David Peterson. Something about the name tickled at Jennifer's memory, but she dismissed it. In her line of work, she encountered dozens of names daily. David returned to his documents, property assessments, zoning permits, and financial projections for the buildings he was considering purchasing. One of them, ironically, housed this very cafe. He'd been delaying the decision, inexplicably hesitant to sign off on a redevelopment that would displace the current tenants. Now sitting here, he understood his reluctance. There was something warm about this place, something genuine that couldn't be replicated in the upscale bistros his development would likely attract. Jennifer returned with his order. Just as David's phone rang, he answered briskly while she arranged his plate on the table. As she moved to step away, her foot caught on the leg of a neighboring chair. She stumbled, inadvertently knocking into David's table. Time seemed to slow as his coffee cup tipped, the dark liquid spreading rapidly across his documents. Jennifer gasped, grabbing napkins from her apron pocket. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, mortified. "I'm terribly sorry, sir." David's initial flash of irritation faded as quickly as it had appeared. "It's fine," he assured her, helping to mop up the spill. "Nothing irreplaceable." As Jennifer leaned forward to blot the papers, the half medallion she wore slipped out from beneath her uniform. David's eyes locked onto it, his hand freezing mid-motion. The distinctive edge, the worn image of St. Jude, the unique pattern that had been hand-engraved. It was unmistakable, identical to the half he'd carried in his wallet for nearly 3 decades. Jennifer, unaware of his shock, continued apologizing. "I'll get you fresh coffee, and of course, your meal is on the house today." "Your necklace," David said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "May I ask where you got it?" Jennifer's hand instinctively went to the medallion. "It was my mother's," she said cautiously. "Well, my adoptive mother's. She gave it to me before she passed away." David's heart hammered in his chest. "Your adoptive mother?" "Yes, Nancy Fletcher. She raised me after my aunt died." The name meant nothing to David, but he couldn't tear his eyes from the medallion. It couldn't be a coincidence. The piece was one of a kind, specially made for him and Deborah. "I need to take a call from the hospital," Jennifer said suddenly, checking her phone. "My son, he's not well. I'll send someone else with your fresh coffee." As she hurried away, David sat immobile, his mind racing with impossible theories. After a moment, he followed her to the counter, where she was speaking anxiously into her phone. "Yes, doctor, how much more would it cost to move up the surgery?" "I see. Yes, I understand. I'm close. I just need a little more time to gather the rest." When she hung up, David cleared his throat. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. Your son is in the hospital." Jennifer looked up, surprise and wariness battling in her expression. "Yes, Tyler has a congenital heart condition. He needs surgery, but..." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable discussing personal matters with a customer. "I'm sorry to pry," David said sincerely. "It's just, I lost someone to heart issues many years ago. Is there anything I can do to help?" For a fleeting moment, Jennifer's professional mask slipped, revealing the exhausted, frightened mother beneath. "That's very kind, but we'll manage. I should get back to work." David nodded, returning to his table. He left a generous tip with his bill, but before departing, he asked the manager for a private word. That evening, Jennifer found an unmarked envelope in her locker. Inside was exactly 1/350th, the precise amount she needed for Tyler's surgery. There was no note, no explanation, just the money that would save her son's life. Outside in the rain, David Peterson sat in his car, watching the cafe, the half medallion burned in his pocket. After 27 years of emptiness, he suddenly felt alive with purpose and terrified of what he might discover. Jennifer's hands trembled as she counted the money for the 3rd time. The crisp bills totaled exactly 1,350. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. How could anyone know the exact amount she needed? She sat on the bench in the empty employee locker room, the envelope clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Jen, you still here?" Sal poked his head through the door. His expression softened when he saw her tears. "Hey, what's wrong?" She held up the envelope. "Someone left this for me. It's exactly what I need for Tyler's surgery." Sal's eyebrows shot up. "What? Who would—" "I don't know." Jennifer wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "There's no note, nothing, just the money." "Well, whoever it was, they're an angel," Sal said, leaning against the doorframe. "Maybe it was that suit who spilled his coffee. He was asking Carol a lot of questions after you left to take that call." Jennifer's mind flashed to David Peterson's face, the way he'd stared at her medallion. His strange questions about her family. Could it have been him? But how would he have known the exact amount she needed? "I need to find out who it was," she said, carefully tucking the envelope into her purse. "I have to thank them." Sal shrugged. "Some people prefer to stay anonymous, you know? Maybe just be grateful and pay it forward someday." Jennifer nodded, but her mind was already racing. If it was David Peterson, why would a wealthy businessman take such an interest in a waitress and her sick child? And why had he seemed so fixated on her medallion? David sat in his hotel room, staring at the half medallion in his palm. The edges were worn smooth from years of being carried in his wallet, thumbed like a worry stone during his darkest moments. After seeing its twin hanging around Jennifer Lewis's neck, he felt as though he'd been struck by lightning. Could it really be? He murmured to himself. After all these years, he opened his laptop and typed Nancy Fletcher Portland into the search bar. Several results appeared, but one caught his eye, an obituary from 3 years ago. He clicked on it, reading quickly. Nancy Fletcher, 62, beloved nurse at Portland Memorial Hospital for over 30 years, passed away after a brave battle with cancer. She is survived by her adopted daughter, Jennifer Lewis. The article mentioned Nancy's dedication to the pediatric ward and her work during the Coastal Highway disaster 27 years ago, the very accident that had supposedly claimed Deborah's life. David's pulse quickened. Nancy Fletcher had been a nurse at the hospital where victims of that accident were taken. Jennifer had Nancy's half of the medallion. The timing aligned perfectly with the age Jennifer appeared to be, mid-20s, the right age to have been born around the time of the accident, but it was impossible. The authorities had told him that both Deborah and their unborn child had died. There had been a funeral, a memorial stone. He had mourned them for 27 years. David reached for his phone, then stopped. What would he say? "Excuse me, I think you might be my long-lost daughter." Jennifer would think he was insane. He needed more information before approaching her again. Tomorrow, he would visit the hospital where Nancy Fletcher had worked. Perhaps some of her former colleagues might remember something about that night 27 years ago. Jennifer sat beside Tyler's hospital bed, running her fingers through his sandy brown hair as he slept. The monitor beeped steadily, a reassuring rhythm that meant his heart was still fighting. "We're going to get you that surgery, buddy," she whispered. "Someone sent us a miracle." She thought about all the nights she'd sat in this very chair, watching her son's chest rise and fall, terrified that each breath might be his last. Tyler had inherited the same heart condition she had, a rare congenital defect that had required surgery when she was an infant. Jennifer's scar was barely visible now, a thin white line on her thigh where they'd accessed an artery when she was just days old. Nancy had always been vague about Jennifer's biological parents. "Your mother was my dear friend," she would say. "She loved you very much, but she couldn't take care of you." Jennifer had assumed her biological mother was Deborah, who she'd known as her aunt growing up. Deborah had lived with them until Jennifer was 15, when a car accident took her life, but Nancy had never explicitly confirmed this. And after her death, Jennifer found herself with more questions than answers. The memory of her last conversation with Nancy surfaced in her mind. "Jenny," Nancy had said, her voice weak from the cancer that was rapidly consuming her. "In my closet, there's a cherry wood box with flowers carved on the lid. Inside, you'll find the other things I saved for you, including the medallion." Jennifer had retrieved the box, opening it to find an old silver chain with half a jeweled medallion. "It was your mother's," Nancy explained. "She wore it every day. Before she died, she asked me to give it to you when you were ready." "Ready for what?" Jennifer had asked. Nancy's eyes had grown distant. "To find the other half. When you do, you'll discover your roots." She'd squeezed Jennifer's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll wear it. Someday, it will lead you where you need to go." Jennifer had dismissed it as the rambling of a dying woman. She wore the medallion to honor Nancy's memory, not because she believed it would lead her anywhere. Now, she wondered if there was more to Nancy's words than she'd realized. Tyler stirred in his sleep, pulling Jennifer back to the present. "Mom," he mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. "I'm here, sweetie." She leaned closer, brushing his cheek with her hand. "Did you bring Robo-Rex?" he asked, referring to his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Jennifer smiled, pulling the worn toy from her bag. "Of course I did. He wanted to come visit you." Tyler hugged the dinosaur to his chest. "When can I go home?" "Soon," Jennifer promised, her heart swelling with new hope. "In fact, I have wonderful news. We can schedule your surgery now. Someone sent us the money we needed." Tyler's blue eyes widened. Was it Dad? The innocent question stung. Tyler's father had disappeared before he was born, unwilling to deal with a child who might have medical problems. Jennifer had never heard from him again. "No, sweetie. It was someone else. A kind person who wanted to help us." "Like a superhero?" Tyler asked, his imagination taking flight despite his fatigue. Jennifer smiled. "Maybe. A secret superhero." As Tyler drifted back to sleep, Jennifer's thoughts returned to David Peterson and his strange reaction to her medallion. Tomorrow, she would try to find him. If he was her mysterious benefactor, she needed to thank him properly. And if his interest in her medallion meant something more, she needed to know what. The following morning, David stood at the nurses' station in Portland Memorial Hospital, waiting to speak with the head of the pediatric department. He'd claimed to be researching for a potential donation from his foundation, which wasn't entirely untrue. "Mr. Peterson," a woman in her 60s approached, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Marianne Collins. I understand you're interested in our pediatric cardiology department." "Yes, thank you for meeting with me." David shook her hand. "I'm particularly interested in the history of the department. I understand Nancy Fletcher was a longtime nurse here." "Doctor." Collins's face softened. "Nancy was exceptional. We still miss her terribly. Did you know her?" "Not personally," David admitted, "but I believe she may have been involved in a case that's of particular interest to me. The coastal highway accident 27 years ago." A flicker of recognition crossed Dr. Collins's face. "That was before my time here. But of course, everyone knows about that tragedy. Nearly a dozen fatalities. Nancy was working that night." "Yes. Do you know if there were any pregnant women among the survivors?" David asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Dr. Collins gave him a curious look. "That's an oddly specific question, Mr. Peterson. May I ask why you're interested?" David hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. "My wife was one of the victims. She was 5 months pregnant at the time. I was told neither she nor our child survived, but..." He left the sentence hanging. The doctor's expression shifted to one of compassion. "I'm very sorry for your loss. As I said, I wasn't here then, but hospital records from that period would be archived. However, they're confidential without proper authorization." David nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "I understand. Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, Dr. Collins added, "You might want to speak with James Latimer. He was the attending physician in the ER that night, and a close friend of Nancy's. He's retired now, but he still volunteers at our free clinic on Tuesdays." David thanked her, a new spark of hope igniting in his chest, as he headed for the elevator. He didn't notice Jennifer Lewis stepping out of a room further down the hall, watching him with a mixture of surprise and determination. The rain had finally stopped by the time Jennifer arrived at Evergreen Memorial Cemetery. A thin mist hung between the headstones, giving the grounds an ethereal quality that seemed fitting for the day. She clutched a small bouquet of calla lilies, Nancy's favorite flowers, in one hand, and Tyler's good news in her heart. "I wish you could see him, Nancy," Jennifer said softly, as she approached the familiar gray granite marker. "He's so brave. The doctor scheduled his surgery for next week." She knelt down, placing the flowers against the stone. After 3 years, the ritual still felt both comforting and painful. This was where she came when she needed to feel grounded, when life's challenges seemed too overwhelming. Today, though, she came with gratitude. "Someone left money for Tyler's surgery," she continued, brushing away a few fallen leaves from the base of the headstone. "The exact amount we needed. I don't know who it was, but I can't help thinking you had something to do with it." Jennifer smiled sadly. "Still looking out for us, even now." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. Worn at the edges from being handled over the years, it showed Nancy in her nurse's uniform, arm in arm with a beautiful young woman with auburn hair. "I found him, Nancy," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man who reacted to my medallion. He was at the hospital today, asking questions about you." She traced her finger over the image of the woman beside Nancy. I think he might know something about Aunt Deborah, or maybe about my birth mother. Jennifer placed the photo at the base of the headstone, weighing it down with a small stone so the breeze wouldn't carry it away. She touched the half medallion around her neck, remembering Nancy's cryptic words. Find the other half, and you'll discover your roots. I'm going to find out what it all means, she promised, for Tyler's sake, and for mine. David stood before the small memorial stone he'd commissioned 27 years ago. Unlike the other graves in the cemetery, this one marked no actual remains. Deborah's body had never been recovered from the ravine where her car had plunged during the storm. Deborah Ann Peterson, beloved wife and mother-to-be, forever in our hearts. He'd visited this spot every year on the anniversary of her death, but today was different. Today, for the first time in nearly 3 decades. He came with something other than grief in his heart. He came with questions, with a flicker of impossible hope. I don't know if I'm losing my mind, Deb, he said softly, but I saw our medallion yesterday, your half of it, around a young woman's neck. He pulled his own half from his pocket, turning it over in his palm. She's the right age. She was raised by a nurse who worked at the hospital the night of your accident. The silence that greeted his words was familiar, but today, it felt less like an ending, and more like an invitation to discover something new. David placed a bouquet of calla lilies against the stone, the same flowers he'd carried at their wedding. As he straightened up, movement caught his eye. About 50 yards away, a young woman was kneeling at another grave. Even from this distance, he recognized her immediately. Jennifer Lewis. His heart began to race. What were the odds that they would both be here? On this day of all days, he watched as she placed something at the base of the headstone. A photograph. It seemed, before rising to her feet, David hesitated. Should he approach her? What would he say? He had no proof of his suspicions, just a series of coincidences and a growing conviction that they were somehow connected. Before he could decide, Jennifer turned and spotted him. Her expression shifted from surprise to determination as she began walking purposefully in his direction. Jennifer had felt someone watching her. When she turned and saw David Peterson standing at a nearby grave, she knew it couldn't be coincidence. The man who had reacted so strongly to her medallion, who had possibly left the money for Tyler's surgery, who had been asking about Nancy at the hospital. Here he was, in the very place where she came to feel closest to her past. Mr. Peterson, she called as she approached. I thought that was you. David seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Ms. Lewis, I didn't expect to see you here. Nor I you. Jennifer's eyes drifted to the headstone he stood before. The name caught her attention immediately. Deborah Ann Peterson, the same name as her Aunt Deborah, the woman in the photograph she'd just placed at Nancy's grave. Deborah, she whispered, her eyes widening. Was she your wife? David nodded slowly. She died 27 years ago. Today is the anniversary. He gestured toward Nancy's grave. Who are you visiting? Nancy Fletcher. She raised me after my aunt died. Jennifer hesitated, then decided to take a risk. My aunt's name was also Deborah. David's face paled. May I see the photograph you left at the grave? Jennifer led him back to Nancy's headstone. The photo was still there. Secured by the small stone, David knelt down, his hand trembling as he picked it up. This woman, he said, pointing to the figure beside Nancy. This is my Deborah. Jennifer stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. That's my Aunt Deborah. She lived with Nancy and me until I was 15. David shook his head, his voice hoarse with emotion. No, this is definitely my wife. I'd know her anywhere. He turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, was written, Nancy and Deb, Portland Memorial, 1996. 1996. David's voice cracked. But that's 2 years after the accident, Jennifer finished for him. Her mind racing to process this information, David looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Jennifer, how old are you? 26. And your birthday? May 15th, 1998. David sank onto the damp grass, the color draining from his face. The accident was November 3rd, 1997. Deborah was 5 months pregnant. Jennifer's hand went instinctively to her medallion. Mr. Peterson, why did you react this way when you saw my necklace yesterday? Wordlessly, David reached into his pocket and pulled out his half of the St. Jude medallion. He held it up next to hers. Jennifer gasped as she saw how perfectly the two pieces aligned, the jagged edges fitting together like puzzle pieces. When joined, they formed a complete image of St. Jude, with an inscription that had been illegible on the separate halves. "True love always finds its way back. Deborah and I split this medallion the day before she left for her trip," David explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a promise that we'd always find our way back to each other." Jennifer backed away, overwhelmed by the implications. "This doesn't make sense. My Aunt Deborah couldn't have been your wife. She would have told me. Nancy would have told me. Unless she couldn't," David suggested gently. "Jennifer, I was told that both Deborah and our unborn child died in that accident. But what if they didn't? What if Deborah survived, but couldn't remember who she was? What if you are our child?" Jennifer shook her head vehemently. "No, that's crazy. I had a normal childhood. I grew up with Nancy and Aunt Deborah. I have memories." "Beginning when?" David pressed. "What's your earliest memory?" Jennifer tried to think back, but found her earliest clear memories only went back to when she was about 4 or 5. Before that, everything was a blur of impressions. "This is insane," she said, taking another step back. "You're a stranger. You can't just show up and claim to be my father based on half a necklace and some wild theory." "I know how it sounds," David acknowledged, "but the coincidences are too significant to ignore. Your age, the medallion, the fact that you were raised by a nurse who worked at the hospital the night of the accident. And now this photograph." Jennifer stared at the picture in his hand, at the smiling face of the woman she had known as her aunt. She remembered how Deborah would sometimes get a faraway look in her eyes, as if trying to recall something just beyond her reach. "I need to go," Jennifer said abruptly, suddenly feeling as though the ground beneath her feet was no longer stable. "My son needs me." "Jennifer, please," David called after her. "At least take my card if you change your mind, if you want to talk more." He held out a business card. After a moment's hesitation, Jennifer took it, tucking it into her pocket without looking at it. "I have to go," she repeated, already turning away. "This is too much." As she hurried through the cemetery, Jennifer couldn't shake the image of the two medallion halves fitting perfectly together, completing a message that had been broken for almost 3 decades. Behind her, David Peterson remained kneeling at Nancy Fletcher's grave, studying the photograph of the woman he had mourned for 27 years, standing alive and smiling beside the nurse who had raised Jennifer Lewis. Jennifer couldn't remember driving home from the cemetery. Her mind was a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts and impossible questions. She found herself sitting in the parking lot of her apartment building, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself, "completely insane." And yet, the medallion pieces had fit together perfectly. The inscription, incomplete on each half, formed a coherent message when joined. "True love always finds its way back." With trembling fingers, she pulled David Peterson's business card from her pocket, CEO of Peterson Development Group, a Portland address and phone number. Nothing extraordinary about it, and yet it felt like holding a stick of dynamite. Her phone rang, startling her. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Lewis, Dr. Rivera would like to speak with you about Tyler's pre-surgical consultation tomorrow." "Yes, of course," Jennifer replied automatically. "Tell him I'll be there at whatever time works." As she ended the call, reality came rushing back. Tyler, his surgery, those were the things that mattered, not some wild story from a stranger in a cemetery. And yet, November 3rd, 1997, the windshield wipers struggled against the torrential rain as Deborah Peterson navigated the coastal highway. She'd insisted on making this trip, despite David's concerns about the weather. "Your parents can wait another weekend to see us," he'd argued that morning. "Mom's birthday is tomorrow," Deborah had countered, resting a hand on her swollen belly. "I want to give her the news in person. Besides, the baby's been kicking up a storm. I think he or she is excited to meet Grandma and Grandpa now." As lightning illuminated the angry Pacific to her right, Deborah was beginning to regret her stubbornness. The road was treacherous, visibility poor. She slowed down, focusing on the yellow lines. Her hand moved to the half medallion hanging around her neck. David had the other half, a silly, romantic gesture, but it comforted her to touch it, as though it connected her to him across the miles. The headlights appeared without warning, a truck on her side of the road, moving too fast on the wet pavement. Deborah swerved instinctively, but the car's tires lost traction. She felt the sickening sensation of sliding, then spinning. The guardrail loomed in her headlights for a terrifying instant, then nothing. At Portland Memorial Hospital, the emergency room was in chaos. A multi-vehicle accident on the coastal highway had sent a dozen victims their way. with more expected. "Another one coming in," a paramedic shouted as they wheeled in a stretcher. Nurse Nancy Fletcher rushed forward. The woman on the stretcher was unconscious, blood matting her auburn hair. Her belly was distended. She was pregnant, at least 5 or 6 months along. "Trauma room 3, Nancy directed, helping guide the stretcher. "Page Dr. Latimer, stat. We've got a pregnant woman with head trauma." As they transferred the woman to the exam table, Nancy noticed the silver chain around her neck. She gently lifted it to move it out of the way for the cardiac leads. Half of a St. Jude medallion hung from the chain. Beeps dropping. Another nurse called out, "Heartbeat is irregular." Dr. James Latimer rushed in, taking in the situation quickly. "We need an ultrasound. Check the fetal heartbeat." The next several minutes were a blur of activity. The woman's injuries were severe: head trauma, internal bleeding, a fractured femur, and the baby was in distress. "We need to perform an emergency C-section," Dr. Latimer announced grimly. "The baby won't survive otherwise, and we might lose her too if we wait." Nancy stayed by the woman's side through the procedure. The baby, a girl, was tiny but alive, though she needed immediate specialized care. "There's another heartbeat," one of the doctors said suddenly. "Twins, but it's very faint." The second baby, a boy, was even smaller than his sister, and in much worse condition. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't save him. As the medical team worked to stabilize the mother, Nancy was tasked with registering the patient. She searched through the woman's purse, recovered from the wreckage, looking for identification. Inside, she found a driver's license for Deborah Peterson, along with a photo of Deborah with a handsome man, her husband presumably. Nancy set these aside for the notification team. Hours later, after her shift should have ended, Nancy was checking on the baby girl in the NICU when a commotion erupted in the waiting area. A man was arguing desperately with the front desk staff. "My wife was in an accident on the coastal highway, Deborah Peterson. Someone called me, but they couldn't tell me anything over the phone, please. I need to know if she's alive." Nancy recognized him from the photograph. David Peterson, Deborah's husband. She was about to approach him when Dr. Latimer intercepted him first. Nancy couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw the moment when David Peterson's world collapsed. He staggered backward, his face a mask of shock and grief, then crumpled into a chair, his head in his hands. Later, she learned the terrible mistake. In the chaos of the mass casualty event, records had been mixed up. Another victim, a Jane Doe who had died on arrival, had been misidentified as Deborah Peterson. By the time the error was discovered, David Peterson had already been told that his wife and unborn child had died. Meanwhile, the real Deborah Peterson remained in critical condition. Her identity temporarily lost in the administrative confusion. When she finally regained consciousness 3 weeks later, she had no memory of who she was or of the baby girl she had delivered. Jennifer stared at the photo on her coffee table, Nancy and Aunt Deborah, smiling in their hospital scrubs. Could it really be possible? Could the woman she'd known as her aunt actually have been her mother? Could David Peterson really be her father? She tried to remember Deborah, to recall details from her childhood. Deborah had always been the more distant of her two caregivers, kind but somewhat reserved, prone to headaches and moments of confusion. Nancy had explained it away as Deb's artistic temperament, but what if it had been something else entirely? What if it had been the lingering effects of brain trauma? Jennifer remembered how devastated she'd been when Deborah died in that second car accident when she was 15. She remembered the funeral, Nancy holding her as she cried. If Deborah had been her biological mother, why wouldn't Nancy have told her then? Unless Nancy had her reasons for keeping the truth hidden. Jennifer's phone rang again. This time, it was Carol from the cafe. "Jen, there's a man here asking for you. That businessman from yesterday, Peterson. Should I tell him you're not available?" Jennifer closed her eyes, took a deep breath. "No," she said finally. "Tell him I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Jennifer arrived at Memory Corner, David was sitting at the same table as the day before, nursing a cup of coffee. His face brightened when he saw her, a hopeful expression that made her heart squeeze uncomfortably. "Thank you for coming," he said as she slid into the chair across from him. "I know this is all overwhelming." "That's putting it mildly," Jennifer replied. "Look, Mr. Peterson, David, please, David, I need you to understand something, even if what you're suggesting is true, and I'm not saying I believe it is. I had a life before today. I had a mother and an aunt who raised me. I have a son who needs me. I can't just..." She gestured helplessly. I understand, David said quietly. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, but I've spent 27 years believing my wife and child died in that accident. If there's even a possibility that you're my daughter, I need to know. Jennifer studied his face, looking for her own features reflected there. His eyes were a different color from hers, but something about the shape seemed familiar. How would we even know for sure? She asked finally. A DNA test would be definitive, David said, but there might be other evidence too. You mentioned earlier that your Aunt Deborah lived with you until you were 15. What happened to her? Jennifer's throat tightened. She died in a car accident. Ironic, isn't it? She was on her way to Boston for some art exhibition. David's expression changed. Boston? I lived in Boston from 1999 to 2011. My company was headquartered there before I moved operations back to Portland. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. The accident was in 2013. Nancy said Aunt Deborah had been having strange dreams, memories coming back to her. She said she needed to go to Boston to find something she'd lost. They stared at each other, the implications hanging in the air between them. Had Deborah finally remembered her past? Had she been on her way to find David when fate cruelly intervened a second time? There's more, Jennifer said slowly. I have a heart condition, the same one my son has. The doctors said it's genetic, but neither Nancy nor Aunt Deborah had it. They always told me it must have come from my biological father. David's face paled. My father died of heart failure at 42. It runs in the Peterson family. The final piece clicked into place. Jennifer felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting, reality rearranging itself around this new narrative. I need time to process this, she said, rising from her chair. And I need to focus on Tyler's surgery after that. Maybe we can talk about a DNA test. David nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, your son comes first, but Jennifer. He hesitated, then continued softly. Whether or not you choose to pursue this further, please know that I was the one who left the money for Tyler's surgery, not out of any expectation, but because it was the right thing to do. Jennifer nodded. Unable to speak past the lump in her throat, as she turned to leave, David called after her one more time. Jennifer, what's your son's full name? She paused, looking back. Tyler David Lewis. The significance wasn't lost on either of them. Somewhere deep in Jennifer's subconscious, she had chosen to name her son after the father she had never known. The memory of Nancy's sealed box hit Jennifer suddenly, as she was organizing Tyler's backpack for his hospital stay. Her son had been admitted early for pre-surgical monitoring, and Jennifer was gathering his favorite books, games, and of course, Robo-Rex. The box, she whispered, freezing in place with Tyler's pajamas in her hands. Nancy's final gift, a cherry wood box with flowers carved on the lid, matching the engraving on the small metal tin where Jennifer kept Tyler's surgery fund. She'd placed it in the back of her closet after Nancy's death, too overwhelmed with grief to examine its contents beyond the medallion. When the halves meet, open the box and you'll find your roots, Nancy had said. At the time, Jennifer had thought it was just the pain medication talking. Now those words took on new significance. She dropped the pajamas into the backpack and rushed to her bedroom, pushing aside hanging clothes and stacked shoe boxes. She found it, a rectangular wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, its surface intricately carved with delicate cherry blossoms. Jennifer carried it to her bed with trembling hands. For 3 years, it had sat untouched, a tangible piece of Nancy that Jennifer hadn't been ready to face. Now, it might hold answers to questions she'd never thought to ask. She ran her fingers over the small brass lock. Nancy had given her the key on a separate chain, which Jennifer kept in her jewelry box. After retrieving it, she sat cross-legged on the bed, the box before her like some kind of Pandora's mystery. Here goes nothing, she murmured, inserting the tiny key into the lock. Inside, she found a collection of carefully preserved items, photographs, letters, a small diary bound in faded blue leather, and several official-looking documents in sealed envelopes. The first photograph made her gasp. It showed a hospital room, where a much younger Nancy stood beside a bed. In the bed lay a woman Jennifer instantly recognized as Deborah, looking pale and thin, cradling a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. Jennifer turned the photo over, written on the back in Nancy's precise handwriting, Deborah and Jennifer, May 15th, 1998, her birthday. With increasing urgency, Jennifer sifted through the other items. There were more photos. Deborah holding baby Jennifer, Nancy giving toddler Jennifer a bath, the three of them at what appeared to be Jennifer's second or third birthday. Then she found an envelope marked Hospital Records. Inside was a birth certificate, Jennifer scanned it quickly. Mother, Jane Doe, identity unknown. Father, unknown birth date, May 15th, 1998. Attending physician, Dr. James Latimer. Attending nurse, Nancy Fletcher. Another document caught her eye, a legal name change form, dated 6 months later, changing Jane Doe to Deborah Fletcher, with Nancy Fletcher listed as her sister. They created a new identity for her, Jennifer whispered, the pieces falling into place. The final item in the box was the blue diary. Jennifer opened it with reverence, recognizing Nancy's handwriting immediately. November 3rd, 1997. The accident victims keep arriving. So much tragedy tonight. The pregnant woman, Deborah Peterson, delivered twins by emergency C-section. The boy didn't make it. The girl is tiny but fighting. I've been checking on her all night. Somehow, in all the chaos, Mr. Peterson was told his wife and baby died. By the time the mistake was discovered, he'd already left the hospital, devastated. Deb remains unconscious, her prognosis uncertain. November 10th, 1997. Deborah opened her eyes today, but there's no recognition there. The neurologist says she has severe retrograde amnesia. She doesn't know her name, doesn't remember being pregnant. I've been visiting her daily. Something about her reminds me of my sister Martha before cancer took her last year. I can't explain it, but I feel responsible for her somehow. The entries continued, documenting Deborah's slow recovery and Nancy's growing attachment to both mother and baby. Jennifer read with mounting disbelief as Nancy described her decision to help Deborah establish a new identity as her sister-in-law. May 15, 1998. Jennifer Rose was born today, perfect in every way. Deborah may not remember her past, but she already loves this child with her whole heart. I told the adoption agency I'd handle everything, that my sister Deborah just needed help with the paperwork. I know what I'm doing is wrong, legally and morally. I should be trying to reunite Deborah with her husband, but he's already mourned and moved on. According to the papers, his company relocated to Boston last month. Would reopening these wounds help anyone? I don't think so, and I've grown to love them both so much. Is it selfish to want to keep this makeshift family together? Jennifer's hands shook as she turned the pages, reading Nancy's inner conflict, her guilt, and her ultimate conviction that she was doing what was best for everyone involved. 2005. Jennifer asked about her father today. Deborah looked to me, panicked. We've decided to tell her that her father was a brief relationship. A good man who died before Jennifer was born. It's becoming harder to keep track of all the lies. Sometimes I dream that the truth comes out, that we're all found out as frauds. But then I look at Jennifer's smile, at how happy we are together, and I tell myself we've made the right choice. The final entries were the most heartbreaking. Written in 2013, Deborah's been having dreams. Memories, I think. She mentioned Boston yesterday, asked if I'd ever been there. I saw something in her eyes I haven't seen in years. A spark of her old self, perhaps. She says she needs to go there, to find something she's lost. I'm terrified she'll remember everything, that she'll hate me for what I've done. But I can't stop her. 15 years I've kept this secret. Maybe it's time the truth came out. The next entry was tear-stained. Deborah is gone. The accident was so sudden, so senseless. Another car crash taking her away, this time forever. Jennifer is devastated. I can't tell her the truth now. It would be too much for her to bear. Maybe someday, when she's older, stronger. For now, I'll continue to be the mother she needs. Jennifer closed the diary, tears streaming down her face. The last entry was dated just weeks before Nancy's cancer diagnosis. She never got the chance to reveal the truth. The ringing of Jennifer's phone jolted her back to reality. It was the hospital. Ms. Lewis, it's Dr. Rivera. I'm afraid we need you to come in right away. Tyler's condition has deteriorated. His heart rhythm is irregular, and we may need to move up the surgery. Jennifer's world narrowed to a single point of focus. I'm on my way, she said, already moving toward the door. The contents of Nancy's box scattered across her bed. David paced the hospital corridor, having rushed over as soon as Jennifer called. They'd barely spoken a dozen words since their meeting at the cafe the day before, but her voice had been frantic on the phone. Tyler's worse. They're taking him into surgery now. I don't know what to do, could you? Would you mind coming? I can't be alone. He'd been surprised by the call, but hadn't hesitated. Whatever their complicated situation, Jennifer needed support, and he was determined to provide it now. Watching her through the waiting room doorway, hunched over paperwork with a hospital administrator, David was struck by how familiar she looked. Not just the potential physical resemblance to himself or Deborah, but something in her manner, in the determined set of her jaw. Mr. Peterson. David turned to find a doctor approaching. A man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Yes, how's Tyler? I'm Dr. Rivera. Tyler's being prepped for surgery now, actually. I wanted to ask you about something Ms. Lewis mentioned. A family history of congenital heart defects. David nodded. On my side, yes. My father had a similar condition. If Jennifer is indeed my daughter, Tyler would be my grandson. Doctor. Rivera's eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. The specific details of this condition would be extremely helpful for Tyler's surgery. Do you happen to know which variation of the defect affected your father? I have his complete medical history, David replied. After his death, I had all his records digitized. I can have my assistant send them immediately. That would be invaluable, Dr. Rivera said, relief evident in his voice. This type of genetic information could significantly improve our approach to Tyler's procedure. As the doctor walked away, David made a quick call to his assistant. Then he approached Jennifer, who had finished with the paperwork and was staring blankly at the waiting room wall. I've sent over my father's medical records, he told her, taking a seat beside her. Dr. Rivera thinks they might help with Tyler's surgery. Jennifer turned to him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Thank you for coming and for that. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a worn blue diary. I found this in a box Nancy left for me. You should read it. It explains everything. David accepted the diary with careful hands, understanding the significance of what she was sharing. They're taking him into surgery now, Jennifer continued, her voice surprisingly steady. It'll be several hours. There's time for you to read it. David nodded, opening the diary to the first page. As he began to read, Jennifer leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. They sat together in silence, united by concern for Tyler and the gradual unraveling of a secret kept for 27 years. The surgical waiting room was eerily quiet. Occasional beeps from the nurse's station and the soft murmur of the television mounted in the corner provided the only soundtrack to David's reading. He turned each page of Nancy's diary with increasing emotion, disbelief giving way to understanding, then to a profound sadness for all the years lost. When he finally closed the diary, his cheeks were wet with tears. He looked over at Jennifer, who had been watching him silently. All this time, he whispered, she was alive. You were alive. Jennifer nodded, her own emotions carefully contained. Years of being a single mother had taught her to compartmentalize, to focus on immediate needs, rather than her own feelings. Right now, Tyler was her only priority. Nancy thought she was doing the right thing, she said. She saw a woman with no memory, a newborn baby who needed care, and made a choice. A choice that kept me from my family for 27 years, David replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. Would you have preferred she left Deborah alone, confused, with no identity and a premature baby to care for? Jennifer challenged. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. No, of course not. I'm grateful she cared for both of you. I just wish, he trailed off, unable to articulate the complex mix of gratitude and regret he felt, that she'd found a way to tell you. Jennifer finished for him. I wish that too. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Tyler's only been in surgery for an hour. We have a long wait ahead of us. Tell me about him, David suggested. David, setting the diary aside. What's he like? A smile softened Jennifer's tense features. He's amazing. So brave. So curious about everything. He loves dinosaurs and space. He wants to be a paleontologist who discovers fossils on Mars. Her smile faltered. He's been dealing with his heart condition his whole life, but he never complains, even when he's scared. He tries to make me feel better about it. He sounds like his grandmother, David said softly. Deborah was like that, always thinking of others, even when she was hurting. Jennifer hesitated, then reached into her bag again. I brought these too, she said, pulling out a stack of photographs from Nancy's box. I thought you might want to see them. David accepted the photos with trembling hands. The first showed Deborah in a hospital bed, holding newborn Jennifer. Despite her pallor and the bandage on her temple, the woman in the photo was unmistakably his wife. She looks so beautiful, he whispered. She was, Jennifer agreed. In my earliest memories, she was the one who sang me to sleep. Nancy was always busy with hospital shifts, but Aunt Deborah, Mom, was there every night. David flipped through the photos slowly, drinking in the sight of the family life he'd been denied. Deborah pushing toddler Jennifer on a swing. Deborah helping Jennifer blow out birthday candles. Deborah teaching a young Jennifer to ride a bike. Were there ever any signs that she remembered her past? He asked. Jennifer considered this. She had headaches sometimes, and nightmares. She'd wake up crying, but couldn't remember what the dreams were about. She paused, recalling a memory. When I was about 12, we were looking at a magazine, and there was an article about your company. Your photo was there. She stared at it for the longest time, then suddenly got a terrible headache and had to lie down. David closed his eyes, imagining Deborah seeing his face, feeling that inexplicable tug of recognition without understanding why. Nancy's diary mentioned that right before the second accident, Deborah was having memories return, he said. She was on her way to Boston, where I was living then. Jennifer nodded. She was excited about the trip, said she had a feeling she might find answers there. I was angry she was leaving. Typical teenage stuff. Our last conversation was an argument. Her voice caught. I never got to say goodbye properly. David reached over hesitantly, placing his hand over hers. I'm so sorry, Jennifer. She looked down at their hands, then reached into her pocket with her free hand and pulled out her half of the St. Jude medallion. Nancy gave me this after Deborah died, said it had belonged to my mother, that I should wear it because someday it would lead me to my roots. She gave a short, humorless laugh. I thought she was being metaphorical. David produced his own half from his pocket. May I? He asked. Jennifer nodded, allowing him to take her piece. Carefully, he aligned the two broken halves, holding them together so the inscription was complete. True love always finds its way back. Deborah and I had these made before we were married, he explained. We split it the day before she left for that trip to her parents' house, the trip that ended in the accident. It was silly and romantic, but it meant something to us. It's not silly, Jennifer said. It found its way back together, just like the inscription said. A silence fell between them, comfortable rather than awkward. In that moment, they weren't strangers anymore, but two people connected by love for the same woman. Concern for the same child. Ms. Lewis, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Dr. Rivera asked me to update you. Tyler's doing well. The procedure is going as expected, but it will be another few hours before they're finished. Jennifer sagged with relief. Thank you. After the nurse left, David spoke tentatively. Jennifer, I know this is all happening very fast, and your focus right now is rightfully on Tyler. But if you're willing, I'd like to do a DNA test to confirm what we both already suspect. Jennifer looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, after everything in Nancy's diary, I think we both need to know for certain. I can arrange for a private lab to do it tomorrow, David offered. The results could be back in 24 hours. That fast. Money tends to expedite things, he said with a slight smile. And I've waited 27 years already. I'd rather not wait any longer than necessary. Jennifer studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the shape of his jawline that was subtly echoed in her own face. I named my son after you, she said suddenly. Tyler David, I didn't know why at the time. I told myself I just liked the name, but maybe somewhere deep down I knew. David swallowed hard, moved beyond words by this revelation. There's something else, Jennifer continued, reaching once more into her bag. She pulled out a sealed envelope with, to be opened when the medallion halves are reunited, written in Nancy's handwriting across the front. I haven't opened it yet, she explained. I was waiting for you, David nodded, understanding the significance. Together, they broke the seal and removed several pages of Nancy's handwriting, her final confession and explanation, written during her last days. As they read through it together, the full story emerged in greater detail than the diary had provided. Nancy described how, in the chaos following the accident, hospital records had been mixed up. By the time the error was discovered, David had already been told that his wife and unborn child had died. When Deborah regained consciousness with no memory, Nancy had made a fateful decision, to give her friend a fresh start, rather than returning her to a husband who believed she was dead and had begun to mourn. I convinced myself I was protecting both of you, Nancy had written. Deborah from the trauma of being forced into a life she couldn't remember, and David from the pain of living with a wife who didn't know him. I told myself it was temporary, that when Deborah's memory returned, we would find you, David. But days became months, then years. The longer I waited, the harder it became to imagine revealing the truth. The final paragraph brought fresh tears to both their eyes. Jennifer, I know now that I was wrong. Every person deserves to know where they came from, who they are. David deserved to know his child. When you find each other, and I believe with all my heart that someday you will, I hope you can forgive an old woman who made a terrible mistake for what she thought were the right reasons. The medallion halves have found each other again, just as the inscription promised. Now it's time for the family to be whole as well. David folded the letter carefully and returned it to Jennifer. I think, he said quietly, that Nancy did what she thought was best in an impossible situation. And while I wish things had been different, I'm grateful that you had her, and Deborah, in your life. Jennifer's response was interrupted by the reappearance of Dr. Rivera, still in surgical scrubs. Ms. Lewis, Mr. Peterson, I have news about Tyler. Jennifer leapt to her feet, her heart in her throat. How is he? Dr. Rivera's expression gave nothing away. Tyler's doing well. The surgery is progressing as expected, but we've encountered a slight complication. What kind of complication? David asked, standing beside Jennifer. The defect is a bit more complex than we initially thought, however, he quickly added, seeing Jennifer's face pale. The medical history you provided, Mr. Peterson, has been extremely helpful. We've been able to adapt our approach based on the information about similar cases in your family. Jennifer let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. So he's going to be okay. We're optimistic, Dr. Rivera confirmed. The surgery will take longer than anticipated, but Tyler is stable. His vitals are strong. Thank you, doctor, David said, placing a supportive hand on Jennifer's shoulder. I'll update you again when we're further along. Doctor, Rivera promised before disappearing back through the double doors. Jennifer sank back into her chair, the brief moment of relief quickly giving way to renewed anxiety. I should have brought him in sooner, she murmured. I waited too long to save enough money. Don't, David interrupted gently. You did everything you could. Tyler is getting the care he needs now, and that's what matters. Jennifer nodded, though the guilt remained etched in her features. They lapsed into silence again, both lost in their own thoughts. Would you like some coffee? David offered after a while. I could use some. And it might be a long night. That would be great, Jennifer admitted. Thank you. When David returned with 2 steaming cups, Jennifer had composed herself. She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup as though drawing strength from it. While you were gone, I called the lab you mentioned, she said. They can see us tomorrow morning at 9. I hope that works for you. David nodded. Of course, I've cleared my schedule indefinitely. He hesitated, then added, no matter what the test shows, Jennifer, I want you to know that I'll help with Tyler's medical expenses. All of them, not just this surgery. Jennifer's immediate instinct was to refuse. But she thought of Tyler, of the lifetime of medical care he might need. Her pride wasn't worth jeopardizing her son's health. Thank you, she said simply. That means a lot. 2013. Deborah Fletcher sat at her small desk, staring at the newspaper clipping in her hands. The photo showed a distinguished-looking man in his 40s, David Peterson, CEO of Peterson Development Group, cutting a ribbon at some corporate event in Boston. Something about his face made her heart race. She'd seen it before, not just in other newspaper articles, but somewhere else, somewhere important. A memory danced at the edges of her consciousness, tantalizingly close yet unreachable. The headache started as it always did, a dull throb at her temples that quickly intensified until it felt like her skull might crack open. With it came flashes of images, a coastal highway in the rain, a half medallion around her neck, a man's smiling face, the same face from the newspaper but younger, more carefree. David, she whispered, the name feeling right on her lips, though she didn't know why. Deborah reached for her migraine medication with shaking hands. As the pain began to subside, she made a decision. 15 years of fragmented memories, of feeling like a stranger in her own life. It was time to find answers. Boston. She would go to Boston and find this man whose face haunted her dreams. Something told her he was the key to unlocking her past. The technician at the private lab was efficient and discreet, taking cheek swabs from both David and Jennifer without unnecessary conversation. The sterile environment, with its bright lights and gleaming surfaces, felt oddly appropriate for such a momentous occasion. Scientific proof to confirm what their hearts already believed. We'll have the results by tomorrow morning, the technician informed them as they prepared to leave. Dr. Sanders will call you personally with the findings. Outside, the Portland morning was crisp and clear, a welcome change from the previous day's rain. David glanced at Jennifer as they walked to the parking lot. Back to the hospital, she nodded. Tyler should be waking up soon. The doctor said the surgery went well, but they're keeping him sedated to help with recovery. I'd like to come with you. If that's all right, David said cautiously. Even if we don't have the test results yet, Jennifer considered this. Part of her wanted to protect Tyler from the confusion of meeting a stranger who might or might not be his grandfather, but another part recognized David's genuine concern, his right to be there if he truly was family. Okay, she decided, but let me explain things to him first, when he's awake and feeling better. Of course, David agreed readily. I can wait in the background. He won't even need to know who I am yet. During the drive to the hospital, Jennifer found herself studying David's profile when he wasn't looking. The shape of his jawline, the set of his eyes. She could see potential resemblances to both herself and Tyler. What was she like? Jennifer asked suddenly. Before the accident. David's expression softened immediately. She was extraordinary, vibrant, passionate about art and literature. She could talk about a painting for hours, making you see it in ways you never would have on your own. He smiled at a distant memory. She laughed easily and cried at sappy commercials. She was terrible at cooking but kept trying anyway. She hated being late for anything, and always set our clocks 10 minutes fast. She never cooked when I was growing up, Jennifer remarked. Nancy did all the cooking. She paused, absorbing this new piece of information about the woman she'd known as her aunt. But she was always early for everything. She used to say, being on time means you're already late. David laughed softly. That was her favorite saying. They continued exchanging stories, Jennifer sharing memories of growing up with Aunt Deborah, David offering glimpses of the woman she had been before the accident. Despite the 27-year gap, a coherent picture began to emerge. A woman who had maintained her essential nature even when her memories were gone. Tyler was still sleeping when they arrived at his room. The sight of him in the hospital bed, small and pale with tubes and wires connecting him to various machines, made David's throat tighten with emotion. This was his grandson, a child of his bloodline, the continuation of a family he'd thought ended in that ravine 27 years ago. Jennifer moved immediately to Tyler's side. Brushing his hair back from his forehead with practiced tenderness, David remained by the door, unwilling to intrude on the intimate moment. Dr. Rivera joined them shortly, carrying Tyler's chart. The surgery was a complete success, he reported. We were able to fully repair the defect with proper care and monitoring. He should be able to live a normal, healthy life. When will he wake up? Jennifer asked. We're going to start bringing him out of sedation this afternoon. He'll be groggy at first, but by evening, he should be more alert. And recovery time, David inquired from his position by the door. Doctor? Rivera glanced between them, clearly noting the dynamic but professional enough not to comment. He'll need to stay in the hospital for about a week, then take it easy at home for another few weeks. Children are remarkably resilient, though. I expect he'll be back to full activity within 2 months. After the doctor left, Jennifer settled into the chair beside Tyler's bed, while David took up a less obtrusive position by the window. They maintained a companionable silence, broken only by occasional quiet conversation about Tyler's condition or hospital logistics. You should get some rest, David suggested when he noticed Jennifer struggling to keep her eyes open. I can stay and watch him, she hesitated, maternal instinct warring with exhaustion. I don't want him to wake up alone. I'll wake you the moment anything changes, David promised. You won't be any good to him if you collapse from exhaustion. Reluctantly, Jennifer nodded. She reclined the chair as far as it would go and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. David watched over both of them. This daughter and grandson he hadn't known existed until days ago. The sense of protectiveness he felt surprised him with its intensity. Despite the lack of shared history, the bond of blood spoke powerfully. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Stepping quietly into the hallway to avoid disturbing Jennifer, he answered, Mr. Peterson, this is Dr. Sanders from Pacific Genetics. David's heart raced. Yes, doctor. I know we said tomorrow, but our lab was able to process your samples immediately due to a cancellation. I have your results. David gripped the phone tighter. Go ahead. The DNA comparison shows a 99.9% probability that you are the biological father of Jennifer Lewis. Congratulations, Mr. Peterson. Though he had been expecting it, the confirmation hit David with unexpected force. He thanked the doctor automatically, ended the call, and leaned against the wall for support. It was real. Jennifer was his daughter. Tyler was his grandson. Inside the room, Tyler stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering. David moved quickly to Jennifer's side, gently touching her shoulder. Jennifer, he said softly, I think he's waking up. As Jennifer blinked awake, disoriented momentarily, David added, And the lab called early. The test results are in. Jennifer sat up straight, instantly alert. And, it's confirmed, David said, his voice thick with emotion. You're my daughter, Jennifer. You're really my daughter. Before Jennifer could respond, a small voice from the bed interrupted them. Mom, who's that man? They both turned to find Tyler watching them with curious eyes, groggy but awake. Hey, buddy. Jennifer rushed to Tyler's side, her conversation with David momentarily forgotten. How are you feeling? Tyler's small face scrunched in concentration as he assessed his condition. Kinda weird. My chest hurts. His gaze drifted back to David, standing awkwardly by the foot of the bed. Who's that? Jennifer and David exchanged a look. This wasn't how either had planned the introduction, but Tyler's direct question demanded an answer. This is Mr. Peterson, Jennifer explained carefully. He's a friend who's been helping us with your surgery. David gave a small wave. Hello, Tyler. I'm glad to see you awake. Tyler studied him with the unfiltered curiosity of a 7-year-old. Did you give us the money for my operation? David looked to Jennifer, unsure how to respond. She nodded slightly. Giving permission? Yes, I did, David admitted. I wanted to help. Are you rich? Tyler asked, causing Jennifer to make a strangled sound between a laugh and a groan. Tyler, that's not polite, David chuckled. It's all right, yes, Tyler. I am fortunate enough to have money to help people when they need it. This seemed to satisfy the boy, who nodded sagely. That's good. Mom works really hard, but hospitals cost a lot. His attention shifted as he noticed something else. Hey, where's Robo-Rex? Jennifer produced the stuffed dinosaur from her bag, and Tyler clutched it to his chest with his free arm, the one without the IV. The simple action made David's heart constrict. This child, his grandson, finding comfort in a toy just as Jennifer had at that age. According to one of the photos Nancy had saved, Jennifer had been inseparable from a stuffed rabbit. A nurse entered, breaking the moment. Well, look who's awake. How's my favorite patient feeling? As the nurse checked Tyler's vitals and adjusted his medications, David stepped back, giving them space. Jennifer caught his eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Whether for the financial help or for his discretion with Tyler, he wasn't sure, but he nodded in acknowledgement. When the nurse left, Tyler was already looking drowsy again. The medication will make him sleepy, Jennifer explained quietly. Dr. Rivera said he'd be in and out for the next day or so. David nodded. I should probably give you both some space. I'll be in the waiting room if you need anything. As he turned to leave, Tyler's voice stopped him. Mr. Peterson, will you come back later? I want to show you my dinosaur collection. Mom brought my book with all the pictures. David's voice was unexpectedly rough when he answered. I'd like that very much, Tyler. In the waiting room, David found himself unable to sit still. The DNA confirmation, seeing Tyler awake, it all made their connection real in a way it hadn't been before. He was a father, a grandfather. After 27 years of believing his family line had ended, he suddenly had a daughter and grandson. His phone rang again. His assistant, checking in on the Portland property acquisition that had originally brought him to town. Sir, the board is asking for your decision for... The option expires tomorrow. David had completely forgotten about the business deal. It seemed trivial now compared to the personal developments of the past few days. Tell them I'm extending my stay in Portland indefinitely, he decided. The acquisition is on hold for now. On hold? His assistant sounded confused. But you've been working on this deal for months. Things change, Margaret. I'll explain everything when I'm back in the office. After ending the call, David found himself staring at the blank wall, his mind racing with possibilities. He'd lived in Boston for years, then returned to Portland when his company expanded. Now, his daughter and grandson were here too. The universe had conspired to bring them all to the same city. He wasn't a religious man, but in that moment, he felt a profound sense of something larger at work. Fate, perhaps, or the fulfillment of the promise engraved on the medallion. True love always finds its way back. By evening, Tyler was more alert, though still obviously tired from the surgery. Jennifer had stepped out briefly to get some food from the cafeteria, leaving David to keep Tyler company. So you like dinosaurs? David asked, nodding at Robo-Rex. Tyler's face lit up. They're awesome. I'm gonna be a paleontologist when I grow up. That's a scientist who digs up dinosaur bones, he explained helpfully. That sounds like an exciting job, David said, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. I've always been interested in dinosaurs myself. This was clearly the right thing to say. Tyler launched into an impressively detailed explanation of various dinosaur species, their habits, and the time periods in which they lived. David listened attentively, asking questions that delighted Tyler with their specificity. "Mom says I talk too much about dinosaurs sometimes," Tyler admitted when he finally paused for breath. "I don't think there's such a thing as talking too much about something you love," David replied. "Your grandmother felt that way about art." "My grandmother." Tyler looked confused. "You knew her." David realized his mistake immediately. "I meant, your mom's aunt. I understand she loved art very much." Tyler nodded, accepting this. "Aunt Deborah. Mom has some of her paintings at home. They're really pretty." He yawned widely, his eyelids growing heavy again. "You should rest," David suggested gently. "We can talk more about dinosaurs tomorrow." Tyler nodded sleepily. "Will you stay until Mom comes back? I don't like being alone in hospitals." "Of course," David promised, his heart swelling with protective affection. "I'll be right here." As Tyler drifted off to sleep, David studied his small face, noting the subtle Peterson features, the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. Even at this young age, Jennifer returned, carrying 2 sandwiches and coffees. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, offering him one of each. "Thank you," David accepted gratefully. "Tyler's just fallen asleep again. We had quite a conversation about dinosaurs." Jennifer smiled tiredly. "He probably gave you his full lecture. Sorry about that." "Don't be. It was fascinating. He's an incredibly bright child." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both watching Tyler's peaceful sleep. "The DNA test," Jennifer said finally. "You said it confirmed." "Yes," David nodded, "without any doubt. You're my daughter, Jennifer." She took a deep breath, absorbing this reality. "It's strange. Part of me has known since you showed me your half of the medallion, but hearing it confirmed scientifically makes it real." "I know what you mean," David agreed. "I've spent the last few days swinging between certainty and disbelief, even with all the evidence. It seemed too incredible to be true." Jennifer hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "What happens now?" It was a loaded question, encompassing so many variables: their relationship moving forward, Tyler's place in all of this, practical considerations about money and support, emotional ramifications of their newfound connection. "Whatever you want to happen," David responded carefully. "I don't want to impose myself on your life, Jennifer. You and Tyler have gotten along without me for this long, but if you're willing, I'd like to be part of your lives going forward." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "When I was growing up, I used to imagine what my father was like. Nancy and Deborah told me he had died before I was born, so I made up stories about him, that he was brave and kind, that he would have loved me if he'd had the chance." She met David's eyes. "I think the real story is better." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I would have loved you, Jennifer, if I'd known about you. Nothing would have kept me from being in your life. I believe that," she said simply. "And that's why I think Tyler should know who you really are, not right away. He needs to recover first, and it's a lot for a 7-year-old to process. But soon," David nodded, deeply moved by her trust. "Whenever you think the time is right." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Rivera entered, followed by another doctor David didn't recognize. "Ms. Lewis, Mr. Peterson, this is Dr. Chen, our pediatric cardiologist. She'll be overseeing Tyler's recovery." Dr. Chen smiled warmly. "Tyler's post-operative results are excellent. The repair was completely successful, and his heart function is already showing significant improvement. The data from your father's medical history was invaluable," Dr. Rivera added, addressing David directly. "It helped us tailor our approach specifically to Tyler's condition. This particular variant of the defect runs in families, and having that genetic information made all the difference." David and Jennifer exchanged a look, both recognizing the irony. The very connection that had been hidden for so long had ultimately been crucial to Tyler's successful treatment. "When can he come home?" Jennifer asked. "If he continues to progress this well, I'd say in about 5 days," Dr. Chen replied. "Then he'll need a few weeks of rest at home before returning to normal activities." After the doctors left, Jennifer turned to David. "I should warn you," she said with the ghost of a smile. "My apartment is tiny. There's barely room for Tyler's dinosaur collection, let alone visitors." David understood the implied question. "I have a house on the west side. Plenty of room for both of you while Tyler recovers, but only if you're comfortable with that," he added quickly. "I could also help you find a larger apartment. Or, let's take it one day at a time," Jennifer suggested. For now, let's just focus on Tyler getting better." David nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her approach. They had time now, something that had been stolen from them for 27 years. He could afford to be patient. In his sleep, Tyler shifted slightly, his small hand reaching out. Jennifer took it immediately, a reflex born of years of maternal devotion. After a moment's hesitation, she reached for David's hand with her free one, creating a physical connection between the 3 generations. "One day at a time," David agreed softly. 3 months had passed since Tyler's surgery. The Portland spring had fully blossomed, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed fitting for the newly formed Peterson family. Jennifer stood behind the counter of what was once Memory Corner Cafe, watching as David and Tyler hung a new sign over the entrance. The wooden placard swung gently in the breeze as they secured it in place. "The Two Halves," it read in elegant script, with a subtle design of a medallion in the background. "What do you think?" David called through the open door, pride evident in his voice. "It's perfect," Jennifer replied, her smile genuine. The transformation of the cafe had been David's idea, proposed about a month after Tyler's successful recovery. Instead of pursuing his original plan to redevelop the building, he'd offered to buy the cafe itself and renovate it into a family business. "Memory Corner was there for you when you needed it," he'd explained. "But now we can make it something that represents our story, the two halves coming together." Jennifer had been hesitant at first. She was used to making her own way, and accepting such a significant gift from David still felt strange, but she couldn't deny that the offer made practical sense. She knew the cafe business inside and out, and managing it would give her the flexible schedule she needed for Tyler's ongoing checkups. More importantly, it would give all 3 of them a project to work on together, a way to build their relationship, while also building something tangible. Tyler bounded into the cafe, his energy fully restored after his surgery. "Grandpa says we can open tomorrow if the health inspector says it's okay." Jennifer still marveled at how quickly Tyler had adapted to having a grandfather in his life. Children, it seemed, were far more resilient and accepting than adults, once they'd carefully explained the situation, framing it as a happy discovery, rather than a long-kept secret. Tyler had simply nodded and asked if this meant he got presents for both his birthday and Christmas. David, of course, had spoiled him shamelessly ever since. "The inspector's coming at 3, Jennifer confirmed. "Everything should be fine. We've followed all the regulations to the letter." The cafe's renovation had been comprehensive but thoughtful. They'd preserved the cozy atmosphere that regular customers had loved while updating the kitchen, expanding the seating area, and adding a small art gallery section featuring local artists. A tribute to Deborah's passion, Ms. Lewis. Carol, one of the original waitresses who'd stayed on through the transition, poked her head out from the kitchen. "The display case for the medallion has arrived." Jennifer nodded. "Bring it out. We'll set it up now." The custom-made glass display case was the final touch they'd been waiting for. A small but elegant dome designed to showcase the now reunited St. Jude medallion. David had taken the two halves to a skilled jeweler, who had carefully rejoined them, preserving the natural break line while securing them together permanently. The medallion would be displayed near the entrance, along with a small plaque explaining its significance to the cafe's name. Not the full story, of course. That remained private, but enough to convey the message that sometimes broken things could be made whole again. "Where should we put it?" David asked, carrying the display case to the counter. "I think by the register," Jennifer suggested. "That way everyone will see it when they pay." As they positioned the case, the bell over the door chimed. Jennifer looked up to see Dr. Rivera entering, a newspaper tucked under his arm. "I heard you were opening soon," he said, smiling at Tyler. "Thought I'd stop by to see how my favorite patient is doing." "Dr. Rivera," Tyler ran to him excitedly. "Want to see our new cafe? Grandpa got me my own special chair in the corner where I can do my homework after school." "I'd love to see it," the doctor replied, allowing himself to be dragged toward Tyler's designated spot. Jennifer watched them with a contented smile. Dr. Rivera had become something of a family friend in the months since Tyler's surgery, stopping by occasionally to check on his progress. "He looks great," David observed, coming to stand beside her. "You'd never know he had surgery." "Thanks to you," Jennifer said softly. "If you hadn't come into the cafe that day," David shook his head, "I think we would have found each other eventually. The medallion halves were meant to be rejoined, just like our family." Jennifer rolled her eyes at his sentimentality, but her smile remained. Over the past months, she'd come to understand that beneath David's business-like exterior was a deeply romantic nature, something he'd shared with Deborah. "I found some more of her paintings," David mentioned, following her gaze to the art wall where several of Deborah's works were displayed. "In storage at my old Boston house. I'll bring them next time I go back." Jennifer nodded. They'd been gradually piecing together Deborah's life during the years after the accident. Her artistic development, her struggles with memory loss, her eventual journey toward recovered fragments of her past. It was a way of honoring her, of ensuring that her story wasn't lost. "I have something for you," David added, reaching into his pocket. "I was waiting for the right moment." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny replica of the Seat Jude medallion. "I had it made for you," he explained, "so you'll always have the full medallion with you, even with the original here in the display." Jennifer's eyes welled with tears. These unexpected moments of thoughtfulness still caught her off guard. "It's beautiful, thank you." As David helped her fasten the bracelet around her wrist, Tyler returned with Dr. Rivera in tow. "Mom, Dr. Rivera brought us a newspaper article about the cafe. We're famous." Jennifer took the newspaper, scanning the small feature in the local business section. Memory Corner Cafe reborn as The Two Halves. A family's fresh start. "It's a nice write-up," Dr. Rivera commented, "though they only scratch the surface of your remarkable story. Some stories are better kept within the family," David replied with a meaningful look. As they continued preparing for the next day's grand opening, Jennifer found herself pausing occasionally to take in the scene. Her son, healthy and happy. Her father, finally present in her life, their shared project taking shape around them. The cafe represented more than just a business. It was a physical manifestation of their reconnection, their second chance at being a family. Later that evening, after Tyler had gone to bed in the apartment above the cafe, freshly renovated as part of David's investment, Jennifer and David sat at one of the tables, reviewing last-minute details for the opening. "Are you nervous?" David asked. Jennifer considered the question. "Not about the cafe. We're well prepared and I know this business." She hesitated. "But sometimes I do worry about all of this. Our situation. What if it doesn't work out? What if we're trying to force something because of biology that wouldn't naturally fit?" David was quiet for a moment. "I think what makes a family isn't just blood, Jennifer. It's choice. Nancy and Deborah chose to be your family. Now we're all choosing this. You, me, and Tyler. That choice matters more than DNA." Jennifer nodded, finding comfort in his perspective. "I wish they could see this," she said softly. "Nancy and Deborah, I think they'd be happy for us, despite everything." "I think so too," David agreed. "Nancy made a difficult choice all those years ago, right or wrong. She did it out of love, and in the end, love found a way to bring us back together." Jennifer's hand went to the bracelet on her wrist, the tiny medallion catching the light. "True love always finds its way back," she quoted softly. The next morning, as the first customers began to trickle into the Two Halves Cafe, Jennifer stood behind the counter, watching her father chat animatedly with patrons, while Tyler proudly showed off his homework corner to anyone who would look. The reunited medallion gleamed in its display case, a symbol of their extraordinary journey. For the first time in her life, Jennifer felt complete, not because she'd discovered her biological father, but because she'd finally connected all the pieces of her past. Nancy and Deborah would always be part of her story. But now that story had expanded to include David and a future they would build together. As she served the first coffee of the day, Jennifer glanced at the medallion once more. The inscription seemed to glow in the morning light. True love always finds its way back. And indeed, despite time, tragedy, and circumstance, it had. 1 year to the day after Jennifer and David had met in Evergreen Memorial Cemetery, they returned together. The weather was considerably better this time. Clear blue skies with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming flowers. Tyler walked between them, holding a bouquet of calla lilies in each hand. "Are we almost there?" he asked, his 7-year-old patience wearing thin despite the solemnity of the occasion. "Just a little further," Jennifer assured him, squeezing his shoulder gently. They had made significant changes to the cemetery plots over the past year. David had arranged for Deborah's memorial to be moved next to Nancy's grave, bringing together in death the two women who had been inseparable in life. New headstones had been commissioned for both, with inscriptions that honored their true roles in the family's story. Deborah Ann Peterson, beloved wife, mother and artist. True love always finds its way back. Nancy Marie Fletcher, devoted friend and guardian. Some angels walk among us. As they approached the graves, Jennifer noticed an elderly man standing nearby, watching them with evident interest. Something about his posture, respectful but expectant, suggested he wasn't there by coincidence. "Do you know him?" she murmured to David, who shook his head. Tyler, oblivious to the stranger, carefully placed one bouquet on each grave, then stepped back to stand between Jennifer and David. The three of them observed a moment of silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jennifer reflected on the whirlwind year that had passed. Tyler's recovery, the opening of the Two Halves Cafe, her gradually deepening relationship with David. She had moved into a larger apartment in a building David owned, though she insisted on paying rent, albeit at a reduced rate. Some boundaries were important, she felt, as they navigated their unusual family dynamic. "I think they would be proud of us," David said quietly, breaking the silence. "Of how far we've come." Jennifer nodded. "I still miss them both, but it helps knowing the whole story now." As they turned to leave, the elderly man approached, his steps measured but purposeful. He was tall and distinguished, with a shock of white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of advanced age. "You're David Peterson, aren't you? And this must be Jennifer." David tensed slightly, stepping protectively closer to Jennifer and Tyler. "Yes, we are." "And you are Dr. James Latimer," the man introduced himself. "I was the attending physician the night of Deborah's accident." Jennifer gasped softly. This was the doctor Nancy had mentioned in her diary, the one who had delivered her and tried to save her twin brother, Dr. Latimer. David acknowledged, extending his hand. "Nancy Fletcher mentioned you in her writings." The doctor nodded, shaking David's hand firmly despite his age. "Nancy was a remarkable nurse and friend. I've been retired for many years now, but I read about your cafe in the newspaper, The Two Halves. When I saw the name and the story about a family reunited, I knew it had to be you. How did you find us here?" Jennifer asked. Dr. Latimer smiled gently. "I visit the cemetery every week to pay respects to colleagues who have passed. When I saw Nancy's new headstone a few months ago, with its connection to Deborah Peterson, I hoped I might encounter you eventually." He hesitated. "There's something I've been keeping for a very long time. Something I believe belongs to you." From a weathered leather satchel, he produced a small book, bound in faded blue fabric. This was among Deborah's personal effects the night of the accident. In the confusion, it wasn't included with the items given to the notification team. He looked down, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. By the time I realized the mistake, the records had been confused and Nancy had, well, made her decision. David stared at the book, recognition dawning in his eyes. "That's Deborah's journal. She wrote in it every day." "Not just a journal," Dr. Latimer clarified. "It contains letters to you, Mr. Peterson. Letters she never had the chance to send." Jennifer felt her throat tighten with emotion. Letters from her mother to her father, written just before the accident that had separated them for nearly 3 decades. "Mom," Tyler tugged at her sleeve, sensing the emotional weight of the moment without fully understanding it. "Who's that man? What's he giving Grandpa?" "This is Dr. Latimer," Jennifer explained softly. "He's the doctor who helped when I was born, and he's brought us something very special. Letters from my mother." Tyler's eyes widened. "From Grandma Deborah, the one in the pictures." "Yes, sweetheart." "From her?" Dr. Latimer bent slightly to address Tyler directly. "You must be Tyler. You have your grandmother's eyes, young man." Tyler beamed at this connection to a grandmother he'd never met, but had come to know through stories and photographs. "Why did you keep this all these years?" David asked, his voice carefully neutral as he accepted the journal. The doctor straightened, meeting David's gaze directly. "Initially, I kept it because I intended to return it personally once the record confusion was sorted out. But when I learned that Nancy had created a new identity for Deborah and the baby," he shook his head. "I should have come forward then, I know. But Nancy was so convinced she was doing the right thing, protecting a traumatized woman and an innocent child. And later," Jennifer pressed, "later, it seemed too late to undo what had been done without causing more pain." Dr. Latimer sighed heavily. "I'm not proud of my silence, but I respected Nancy's decision, misguided as it may have been. When Deborah died in that second accident, I nearly contacted you, Mr. Peterson, but I feared the revelation would only bring pain without purpose." David nodded slowly, understanding if not fully forgiving. "And now, When I read about your family reuniting despite everything, I knew it was finally time to complete the circle." The doctor smiled sadly. "Some stories deserve their proper ending, however belated." After exchanging contact information with Dr. Latimer, David insisted they meet again to hear more about the night Jennifer was born. They found a quiet bench beneath a flowering cherry tree. Tyler, sensing the adults needed a moment, asked permission to explore the nearby garden area, remaining within sight but out of earshot. With trembling fingers, David opened the journal. The first page contained a letter dated November 2nd, 1997. "The day before the accident, my dearest David, as I prepare for tomorrow's drive to my parents. I find myself missing you already. These hormone-fueled emotions make me ridiculously sentimental. But I wanted to write to you about the dream I had last night. A dream about our child. I saw her, David. Yes, I'm still convinced it's a girl, despite your certainty about having a son. She had your smile and my eyes, and she was beautiful and strong. In my dream, she was painting, just like I love to do, but with your precise attention to detail, a perfect blend of us both. I know it's just a dream, but it felt so real, so prophetic. I can't wait to meet this little person we've created and watch her grow. Will she have your business sense and my artistic temperament? Your height and my freckles. However she turns out, I know she will be extraordinary because she'll have your strength and determination." The baby's kicking as I write this, as if agreeing with me. 4 more months until we meet him or her. 4 more months until our family is complete. I carry the half medallion with me everywhere, pressing it to my heart when I miss you most. True love always finds its way back, it promises, even when we're apart. I feel connected to you through this small token of our bond. I'll call when I reach my parents' house tomorrow evening. Until then, know that you are loved beyond measure. Forever yours." Deborah David's voice broke as he read the final lines. Jennifer, tears streaming down her face, leaned against his shoulder. "She knew," Jennifer whispered. "Somehow she knew I would be like both of you." They spent the next hour reading through the journal, discovering letters Deborah had written during their early marriage, reflections on their future together, her hopes and dreams for their child. The final entry, heartbreakingly, was a rough draft of a text message she planned to send to David from the road. "Running late, weather terrible. Will call when I arrive safely. Love you." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, they closed the journal. Tyler had returned to their bench, quietly playing a game on Jennifer's phone while the adults read. "What do we do now?" Jennifer asked softly. David looked from the journal to the graves, then to his daughter and grandson. "We honor her memory by being the family she always knew we would be," he said simply. "And we keep her letters safe so Tyler and his children someday will know their extraordinary history." Jennifer nodded, her hand finding the bracelet with its tiny medallion charm. "True love found its way back," she said. "Not just yours and Deborah's, but all of us, past, present, and future." As they walked back through the cemetery, Tyler skipping slightly ahead, David put his arm around Jennifer's shoulders. "Deborah's final wish was for our family to be reunited," he said. "Even without her, that wish has come true." The setting sun caught the medallion charm on Jennifer's wrist, making it gleam like a small beacon guiding them home, to the Two Halves Cafe, where their reunited family's story was displayed for all to see, a testament to the enduring power of love across time, tragedy, and circumstance.